The story of the Double Diamond Law Enforcement Supply Company involves clever engineering, sleek design work, modern craftsmanship, angry customers, lawsuits, a court seizure, and even murder. Okay, I got a little carried away with that last one, but the history of this Glock magazine lower receiver is an interesting tale. This part is for YouTube. None of these items are for sale. All MSRPs mentioned are at least a decade plus out of date. Also, none are still being produced as shown in the old ads anyway. This is equivalent to a 100-year-old Ira Johnson advertisement. The DDLES lower was not the first AR to feed from a Glock magazine, but arguably it was the nicest, or at least the best looking of the era. So let's back up so we can trace the steps of AR-15 and AR-15-ish firearms that could accept a Glock magazine. Colt developed the 9mm AR-15 style rifle in the early to mid-80s, but it did not use the Glock magazine because Glock came out at pretty much the exact same time, and Colt wouldn't base their new design on some company that just came out and makes their stuff out of plastic of all things. Colt started with an Uzi mag that were in turn copies of an old Beretta mag. To position a short pistol magazine in a long rifle magazine well, basically Colt shifted the Uzi mags to the rear and used the extra space as a feed ramp. Special parts like an ejector and mag catch were squeezed into the space as well. The Glock pistol was developed in the early 80s, but it was well over a decade before there was a long gun that utilized its polymer magazines. In 1998, Kel-Tec developed the pricey aluminum-framed Sub 9. It was followed shortly by the Sub 40, chambered in, you guessed it, 40 Smith & Wesson. These did not utilize the Glock magazines though, so we don't care about them. Kel-Tec relatively quickly dropped both and replaced them with a much cheaper alternative, the Sub 2000. The new Sub 2000 was almost half the price of the Sub 9, mainly due to its polymer construction. This time, Kel-Tec decided to utilize the polymer Glock magazines. The Sub 2000 was very popular, and updated versions are still made today. It was the first long gun to utilize the Glock magazine, but it's not an AR, so we don't care about it. So, what would complete the two requirements? AR plus Glock. That would be the Olympic Arms GL. It was announced in 2003, not long after the Kel-Tec Sub 2000 hit the market. The Olympic sold in far fewer numbers though. Reasons being, it was almost like a custom rifle. After you ordered it, there may be a 2 to 4 month wait for it to be built and delivered. They were fairly pricey too. A complete rifle would run you over $900, and that's $2,003. The only way to get one of their lowers was to buy a complete rifle, so no DIYs. The receivers were made of high-quality 70-75 aluminum in the same profile as the standard 5.56 ARs, meaning it had a long rifle-sized mag well. To run the shorter pistol mags, the top of the Glock magazine was somewhat centered and angled towards the barrel. The feed ramp was actually a feed cone. The ejector is in the upper receiver with a design that is unlike any of the other later designs. Like the Colt, it also featured a last round bolt hold-open device. The assault weapons ban ended in 2004, and Olympic Arms kept selling small amounts of their GL rifles. But now you could buy brand new Glock magazines that held over 10 rounds. But apparently, bring your own magazine. At the 2010 SHOT Show, Lone Wolf announced that they too will offer a Glock patterned lower receiver. Apparently, they had a very limited production run in 2009 and 2010, but they decided to pause production in order to fine-tune and tool up for a much larger operation. Like the Olympic, the Lone Wolf had the same profile as a standard AR, but had a different style ejector. But, like I said, they paused for years, so we'll hear more about them later. 2010 also saw the introduction of the Just Right carbine. This rifle falls into the AR-ish category. It does share a few parts with a real AR, but its receiver is purposely designed to run pistol magazines versus having to re-engineer one designed for rifle-length magazines. They did have teething issues, but by early 2011, they seemed to have ironed out the design. The receiver was made of 6061 aluminum, and it had a swappable left-right side charging handle. It was offered in both small-framed Glock magazines and eventually chambered in 9mm 40 and 357 SIG. It was also available with a large-frame Glock magazine chambered in 45 ACP and 10mm. Conversion kits were available to switch back and forth too. It's a very handy rifle, hence its name, and one of its best-selling features is its price. At around $600, it undercut all the Glock magazine competition except the Kel-Tec. But remember, The Kel-Tec is not an AR, so we don't care about it. In late 2010, a company called Double Diamond Law Enforcement Supply, based in Tucson, Arizona, started taking pre-orders for a new Glock pattern lower, based off their recent 9mm Colt magazine pattern lowers. What made theirs different from earlier designs was, instead of leaving the long rifle cartridge-sized magazine well, DDLES reprofiled and removed the unused portion, giving it a much more elegant silhouette. It incorporated such niceties as a last round bolt hold open device, a tensioning screw for a tight upper to lower fit, a flared magazine well, threaded mag catch roll pin, a unique coated and treated floating ejector, and an integrated trigger guard. The price back then for a stripped lower was just under $280, which sounds high, but back then a lower cost about $100, and a mag block adapter for a pistol magazine cost approximately $150, so it was not out of line. DDLES spent 2011 manufacturing standard 5.56 size lowers and their brand new Colt 9mm pattern lowers. The Colt patterns with its straight Uzi style magazines were still the go-to pattern. The Colt mags were perpendicular to the barrel, while the Glock mags were angled to match the grip angle of a Glock handgun, approximately 22 degrees. They also spent 2011 preparing to boost production. They secured an investor, used the new capital on a new shop, new machinery, and new tooling. 2011 also saw the release of another AR-ish rifle by Thuron Defense. The Glock magazine model was called the GA. Feature-wise, the GA model closely mirrored the Just Right carbine, maybe a half a step nicer. It used real AR parts such as the grips, triggers, but used a proprietary 7075 aluminum receiver. They eventually offered both a small frame Glock magazine size in 940 and 357 SIG and a large frame Glock size, the 45 and the 10mm. It also had the side-mounted charging lever that could be swapped to the left or the right side. It also had no last round bolt hold open or even a catch to hold the bolt back. Prices in 2011 were about $700, but creeped up to around $900 after a couple of years. When the spring of 2012 rolled around, Double Diamond Law Enforcement Supply finally spun up production of their new Glock pattern lowers. According to my low-grade research, and this is largely from a long archived thread made at the time about the subject in real time, a company named Synteon owned a lot of the manufacturing side, and they produced and then sold those goods to Double Diamond Law Enforcement. Double Diamond Law Enforcement then sold and distributed to individual customers and retailers. I believe, but I may be wrong, that the only products made in-house were the lower receivers. DDLES sold bolts, uppers, and barrels, but I believe these were mostly made by third parties, although DDLES may have done some finish work like bolt modifications and some sub-assemblies. Early on, you could order assembled uppers, lowers, and maybe even fully assembled rifles. Speaking of bolt modifications, in order to use the pistol caliber blowback bolt with a Glock magazine, the bottom had to be narrowed so it could fit between the feed lips of the single-feed Glock magazine. A common step of the day was to send your bolt to a company called Adco. They would machine your bolt to the proper size for about $80. The new DDLES lower was designed in both standard small and large size Glock magazines. This was done by designing the mag walls to be thinner in the large frame models. You can decode the serial number prefixes using this chart. Early on, production was able to keep up with demand, and orders went out with minimal delays. DDLES continued to take all orders, but delays continued to creep longer and longer. On November 8, 2012, Alex Bosco submitted to the ATF a design for a stabilizing brace that attaches to an AR pistol. Prior to this, AR pistols merely had a bare buffer tube with maybe some foam around it. Bosco designed the brace to help disabled shooters hold an AR pistol more securely. Everybody else found it useful as well. In December of that year, tragedy fell in Newtown, Connecticut. The vice president was appointed as the head of the Interagency Task Force for Guns. And of course, the time-tested way to curb gun sales is to threaten to restrict them. I'm just being sarcastic. That threat made gun sales skyrocket on a wave that lasted for well over a decade. Early in 2013, issues began between DDLES and its manufacturing investor Synteon. Reportedly, Synteon shut off some of the manufacturing machines due to financial rifts between the two. This came at a time when demand had increased substantially. Also, in 2012 and 2013, another competitor trickled out onto the market. JP Enterprises brought out their GMR-12 and was closely followed by its successor, the GMR-13. These were high-quality ARs that featured 7075 aluminum receivers and non-reciprocating side charging handles. The cons were no last round bolt hold open, they were not cheap or easily available. They started at approximately $1,500 and usually there was a long waiting period. In mid-2013, SB Tactical and its partner Sig Sauer quietly started selling pistol braces. Through mid-2013, DDLES continued to take orders and trickled out some of the small-frame Glock lowers. In the fall of 2013, rumors of financial and legal issues about DDLES started popping up online. About the same time, a retailer called Rifle Gear received a large shipment of stripped DDLES lowers. This took buyers that have been waiting for months by surprise. Rifle Gear quickly sold out, but you could sign up to get an email alert when another shipment arrived. Some started wondering if DDLES had pushed individual orders to the back of the line, or had Rifle Gear put their order in months ago. Either way, if you wanted a lower in days versus months, the Rifle Gear company was a very attractive option. Now, when orders were placed on the DDLES website, there was a few options. You could choose a profile that was made to match the Voltar upper receiver. There was an option to pick which type of aluminum the receiver was made from, either standard 6061 aluminum or the stronger, nicer 7075 aluminum. You could even pick between two different types of selector engravings, text or pictograms. Hindsight being 2020, stripped standard profile small frame Glocks made from 6061 aluminum gave you the best chance of getting one shipped to your FFL. There may have only been 2 runs of the 7075 receivers. They were marked T2 while the 6061s were marked T1. The last run of the 7075s went out in late 2013. Total 7075 production numbers were probably double digits at the most. Similar quantities could probably be assumed about the large frame Glock receivers as well. Tensions over delays and rumors of legal and financial troubles led to lawyers and the Arizona Attorney General getting involved. Some customers found that these tactics worked at getting orders that had stretched over months or over a year down to days. Early 2014 production of lowers seemed to be picking up a little steam to both individual customers and to Rifle Gear. But it all came to a halt in April of that year. The judge in the lawsuit ruled in favor of the investor. Synteon was dissolved and DDLES was barred from entering the building where production occurred. The investor took control of all remaining stock. That summer, the investor auctioned off all the remaining lower receivers. That was the last shot at getting a DDLES branded lower. Customers with unfulfilled orders seemed to be left high and dry. I'm not sure how many Glock lowers were made, but judging by some serial numbers I saw, I estimate a little over 1,000 made it out the door. Early that same summer, while pent-up demand was building, Lone Wolf returned to the market. They branded their new carbine as the G9. It was made from 7075 aluminum. Stripped lowers would sell for around $200, I think. Complete lowers could be had for a little less than $400. Complete uppers were available a few months later for around $700. So a complete package would run you around $1,200. The cons about it were it still had the bulky standard AR profile and no last round bolt hold open. But the reasonable price, DEY buildability, that word, and ample immediate availability made up for its deficiencies. In late summer of 2014, the investor, formerly with DDLES, announced a new company and named it after a related cattle brand called Quarter Circle 10. They made some minor changes, like all lowers are now 7075 aluminum, and they made the walls of the large frame Glock lowers thicker, and a few other minor changes to ease manufacturing. Prices stayed the same as DDLES. And that is the end of the story of the Double Diamond Law Enforcement Supply Company lowers. Some of these companies have come and gone. Newer Glock lowers have also been developed, but I think I'll end the timeline here. After a quick internet search, Quarter Circle 10 seems to have recently gone out of business, and DDLES is still operating, selling accessories. Thanks for watching.